Bonjour tout le monde. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to be here today after a very successful nuclear security summit here in Washington. First, I'd like to thank my colleague and friend, the President of the United States, Barack Obama, for hosting this important meeting. Ce sommet a pour but de renforcer la sécurité nucléaire mondiale et de lutter contre le terrorisme nucléaire, l'une des plus grandes menaces à la sécurité internationale. Les leaders mondiaux ont le devoir de prendre toutes les mesures nécessaires pour empêcher le pire. Nuclear security is a priority for the Canadian government. We are committed to working with our allies and partners to prevent nuclear terrorism. Let me highlight a few points. First, countries like Canada have to continue to lead by example. Canada will continue to invest in its world-class nuclear security regime and share our expertise in this field with others. Second, diplomacy and advocacy in support of nuclear security will also be key. Canada will continue to support the International Atomic Energy Agency and the United Nations to advance the highest international standards of nuclear security. Third, states with the financial means to do so should deepen their investment in nuclear security worldwide. Canada remains fundamentally committed to doing so. In this regard, I am proud to announce that Canada will dedicate an additional $42 million in Global Partnership Program funding over the next 2 years to improve nuclear and radiological security worldwide. These funds will be used to, for example, combat illicit trafficking through strengthening national capacities in the Americas and the Middle East, improve physical security at nuclear facilities, promote safe management and disposal of disused radioactive sources in countries and regions with identified needs, primarily in the Americas, and to support the International Atomic Energy Agency's Nuclear Security Fund. Nous sommes également heureux d'avoir co-dirigé, en partenariat avec l'Espagne et la République de Corée, l'élaboration d'une déclaration commune sur la mise en œuvre intégrale et universelle de la résolution 1540 du Conseil de sécurité des Nations unies. Le Canada croit fermement que la résolution 1540 est un élément clé contre les armes de destruction massive terroristes. Cette résolution oblige les États membres de l'ONU à prendre des mesures concrètes pour empêcher que des armes de destruction massive et d'autres matières qui leur sont associées ne tombent pas entre de mauvaises mains. Le Canada co-dirige aussi l'élaboration d'une déclaration commune en collaboration avec le Royaume-Uni qui vise à offrir une formation accréditée complète aux praticiens du domaine de la sécurité nucléaire. During this summit, we have also discussed the threat of terrorist networks such as ISIL. As part of Canada's refocused strategy for support to the global coalition against ISIL and broader engagement in the region, we will allocate $51 million over 3 years to counterterrorism capacity-building programming in the Middle East and North Africa. The funds will be drawn from the resources announced on February 8, 2016, when Canada articulated its refocused strategy for Iraq, Syria, Jordan, and Lebanon. Programming will focus on helping to stem the flow of foreign fighters and counter ISIL's financing and messaging. The funds will also support broader security activities in neighboring countries in order to reduce their vulnerability to ISIL infiltration. Canada has played a constructive role in negotiating the Nuclear Security Summit action plans aimed at strengthening the nuclear security architecture and sustaining the momentum of the post-summit agenda. To this end, we are proud to continue to play a leadership role in the field of nuclear and radiological security and to work with allies and partners to prevent nuclear terrorism. In the margins of this summit, I had the opportunity to meet face-to-face with a number of world leaders to discuss important bilateral issues. I had productive meetings with the President of Argentina, Mauricio Macri, the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe, and the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, David Cameron. During my time in Washington, I was also honored to speak before the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Canada's first federal budget was just over a week ago, so it was a privilege to speak with this distinguished group about Canada's approach to strengthening our economy. Dans l'ensemble, ce fut un voyage incroyablement productif. Nous avons fait de grandes avancées aujourd'hui pour renforcer la sécurité nucléaire internationale et le Canada est fier de participer à cet important effort. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Hello, Mr. Trudeau. In your remarks at the final plenary, you said that the fight against the terrorist groups is more complex, it's becoming more complex, and that we must be more agile in identifying new means to confront them. What exactly did you mean by that?
Well, one of the issues, for example, in the scenario that we were presented of a credible but also quite alarming theoretical terrorist attack using drones, we have to understand that dealing with drones, for example, is something that police forces of the past and security agencies of the past have not had to do. We need to be able to adapt to the realities of modern counterterrorism.
Today, or over the last couple of days, in terms of sort of what countries need to do more to deal with plots sort of outside of the region, things like information sharing, tracking foreign fighters when they leave the region, what can Canada contribute to those discussions? Is there a particular area that you've been asked to go back and say, how can Canada help with this?
Well, Canada has a long history, not just of information sharing with our Five Eyes allies, but is widely recognized around the world as being a very strong source of intelligence and a very effective partner in intelligence gathering. And these kinds of initiatives are what we're going to need to do more of. The thing that came very clear throughout our meetings was that countries, even as disparate a group of countries as we had gathered here, recognize that we are all vulnerable in very similar ways to terrorists using extremely lethal materials, and therefore need to do a better job of sharing and coordinating and collaborating in our approach if we are going to successfully keep our citizens safe from an increasingly sophisticated networks of terrorists.
Prime Minister, in the session, the Prime Minister of Great Britain and the President spoke about the fact that we're never going to be safe as long as we don't deal with the ideology that is perverting so many of these young people, and that countries have to step up to the plate and do something more concrete than simply say we have, security is important, but if we don't deal with the disaffected youth. Is this something that needs to be done? I know you've set up a counter radicalization office, but is this something that needs to be done on a global scale where nations have to get together and say, look, we have to deal with this, whether they're Muslim or Hindi or whatever?
Well, certainly, the consequences of radicalization around the world seem to be greater and more virulent than they have in the past. And how Canada can demonstrate effective counter-radicalization strategies that work with community leaders and communities, work with police and agencies, and demonstrate that we are aware that radicalization is often linked to poverty, but not necessarily, is often linked to marginalization and discrimination, but not always, and understand that we are facing a challenge that is much more complex than we may have thought in the past, and how we coordinate, share best practices, create a narrative to counter the narrative put forward, for example, by ISIL, that says that people who follow Islam are incompatible not just with any other faith, but anyone who is a believer of Islam who doesn't adapt and adopt that rigid ISIL ideology. That message needs to be countered in a very persuasive way, which means also using the kinds of tools that terrorist cells often use to recruit. being much more active on Facebook, social media, and a broad range of communication methods that are going to demonstrate a more compelling approach to counter-radicalization than has necessarily been done in the past.
And the other question I wanted to ask you is, the government has 10,000 privately sponsored Syrian refugee applications in the queue, but no apparent plan to staff up, to up the staffing to respond to this influx, even though we've got this deadline that's looming here. Is the government considering trying to look, maybe we need to get some more people hired here to help out with this?
We are, in fact, increasing the number of privately sponsored refugees that Canada will be accepting. There is a clear demand from community groups and individuals across this country, across our country, to make sure that they can do more to welcome in Syrian refugees as new Canadians. And as a government, we're increasing the number of people we'll be able to accept, and we'll be glad to be able to do more to help in this crisis.
Prime Minister, I just want to get more thoughts from you on the scenario situation that you and the world leaders were presented with. I realize you may not be able to get into detail, but given that this was the first time that you have experienced such a scenario with these other leaders at the summit, aside from the use of drone technology, is there anything that caught you off guard, surprised you, or perhaps alarmed you even?
Well, one of the things that was very clear, and from the work I've done since becoming Prime Minister on measures in place, how Canada will react to various difficult or challenging scenarios that could happen. We know that actually talking through those scenarios, simulating reactions in emergency situations, looking at how communication happens and how very disparate agencies, and indeed in this situation very disparate countries, could and need to work together on dealing with a common threat, was certainly at the center of the presentation we had, and one of the results, or one of the consequences of our discussion, was a commitment to do a better job of bringing our agencies together in simulations so that, heaven forbid, if something were to happen, we would be much more able to respond in a cohesive and coherent way across country lines.
And I just want to get your thoughts on something that happened last week. A Sikh Canadian from Toronto was in Quebec City. He was walking downtown. He was verbally assaulted and also beaten up. And I was just wondering if you could give your reactions to that.
Violence and discrimination is unacceptable in Canada or anywhere else. And certainly the kind of hateful acts that you're describing right now have no place in Canada, and indeed we stand clearly against the kind of discrimination and intolerance that represents.
Mr. Prime Minister, I will ask my question in French. Maybe you can answer in English after. Êtes-vous capable de nous expliquer, ou êtes-vous capable d'expliquer aux Canadiens ce soir pour quelles raisons ils se sentiraient plus en sécurité à la suite de ce sommet en matière de gestion de matériel nucléaire?
Ce sommet, c'était le 4e dans une série sur la sécurité nucléaire, et dans les 6 ans qui ont passé depuis le premier sommet, des grands nombres de pays ont rendu plus sécures leurs produits radioactifs, ont pris des mesures concrètes pour rendre ça beaucoup plus difficile d'accès à des groupes terroristes, par exemple. Et nous avons ensemble démontré une volonté qui va bien au-delà de ce qui était là avant. Je suis extrêmement rassuré par l'unanimité dans cette pièce, des gens qui veulent travailler pour assurer que le scénario cauchemar qu'on peut tous imaginer n'arrivera pas. Et c'est justement ce genre de collaboration et de dialogue et d'échange respectueux sur des enjeux d'importance primordiale qu'on a eu pendant cette rencontre qui me donne énormément d'optimisme pour l'avenir et me rassure par rapport à ce qu'on est en train de faire pour garder nos citoyens en sécurité. one of the things that was very clear throughout this discussion, one of the things that was very clear throughout this summit was that over the past 6 years, countries have taken significant and real steps to give better security, to create better security around their stockpiles of radioactive materials, putting measures in place and addressing the very real concerns that nuclear materials could fall or radioactive materials could fall into the wrong hands and be used by extremists who have demonstrated time and time again a desire to do as much harm to Western countries and to, indeed, their own countries as possible. The cohesiveness of such a very disparate group in wanting to be more responsible and more safe is tremendously reassuring, not just for nuclear safety and security, but for our capacity as a world to come together to address really important issues that we all need to work on together.
Dernière question, est-ce que ça ne vous inquiète pas de voir un joueur aussi important que la Russie absent aujourd'hui?
Évidemment, on veut toujours, dans des enjeux comme ça, rassembler le plus de monde possible. Mais nous allons continuer de travailler avec les organismes comme l'ONU et continuer de s'attendre à ce que la communauté internationale au complet se penche sur la sécurité nucléaire parce que c'est dans l'intérêt de tout le monde. Et ça, on le sait très bien.
Hi, Prime Minister. It was a pretty rare month for those of us based here. Not only did we see a Canadian Prime Minister 3 times, he didn't mention oil until being prompted to do so explicitly yesterday. So I think I'd like to ask you, you're obviously very well aware of some of the struggles and the personal drama involved in the people who work in the industry. You were just in Alberta. So obviously you made a strategic decision not to bring it up and not to talk about the social license you hope that that would one day maybe allow the construction of a pipeline. So what was the reason that you decided not to bring it up explicitly?
Well, I think as you point out, the previous government did an awful lot of talking, and we're very much focused on actions. We're very much focused on demonstrating that Canada is committed to doing what is necessary to protect the environment while growing the economy, demonstrate that we understand the need for public trust when we talk about energy projects, and indeed demonstrate the know-how and innovation and capacity to solve real problems that Canadians have always demonstrated. We have a robust process underway that is going to demonstrate that we are a government that takes very seriously our responsibility to ensure that Canadians are both part of a growing and strong economy, but creating a better future for themselves and their children on an environmental, on a sustainable, and on a development side.
And I'm not sure what the protocol is discussing the details of a hypothetical terrorism video. Can you maybe just tell us what the video was about and your personal reaction to it when you saw it?
Quite frankly, if you don't already have the details of that, which it seems you don't, I don't think it's my place to talk about a scenario that was put before us. But certainly, as I think you've all gathered, it was a scenario, a very credible scenario that involved terrorists getting their hands on radioactive material and how the world can respond to that. And it was a plausible scenario, but it was seen more as a jumping off point for very important discussions rather than a detailed analysis of what we could have done in this situation or that situation differently.
Et pourriez-vous répéter ça en français, s'il vous plaît?
Le scénario qu'on a été présenté était pour lancer une discussion et présenter un scénario plausible mais catastrophique auquel le monde devrait réagir. Et ça a été utile pour vraiment lancer une discussion très importante sur comment nous devons, en tant que pays et en tant que monde, prévenir des événements comme ça.
Monsieur le Premier ministre, si je pouvais vous demander en français aussi, en écoutant Barack Obama tout à l'heure, on comprend qu'on a fait des pas, mais des petits pas, et qu'il reste énormément à faire pour réduire les risques que des terroristes mettent la main sur ce genre de matériel. Quelle est votre priorité numéro 1?
Ben, ma priorité numéro 1, c'est d'abord d'assurer la sécurité de tout ce qu'on a au Canada en termes de matériaux radioactifs et ensuite de faire tout ce que je peux en tant que membre actif et collaboratif de la communauté internationale pour s'assurer que d'autres pays ont la meilleure sécurité autour de leurs produits radioactifs possibles. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. My name is Haikam Nahapetian.
Just a second.
Microphone is off.
Yeah, they're just turning it on.
1, 2, 3.
There we go.
So my name is Haikaram Nahapetian. I am the Washington, D.C. correspondent for the First Channel of Armenia. My question is about the atrocities that take place in Middle East. Lots of Christians died already, Armenians, Assyrians, other ethnic groups, Kurds, Yazidis, and the U.S. administration actually called it as genocide. Do you think this summit would help to prevent further crimes, further atrocities in Syria?
I think any time the international community comes together to reaffirm its unity and steadfastness in the fight against terrorism, anytime we come together to understand that what happens in one part of the world can have repercussions everywhere around the world, and that it is our collective responsibility to do everything we can to keep all of our citizens safe, and that we can only do that by working together. I think any time that happens, then we are doing more to keep people safe around the world and within our own borders.
And a quick follow-up, Mr. Prime Minister. I'm aware of influx of Syrian Armenians to your country, and I know that Canada has already hosted many Armenians, and I think you personally went to airport to meet some Syrian Armenians. I would love to get your comment about this migration of Syrian Armenians and about, more generally, maybe about Canadian Armenian community, if you don't mind.
Well, the Armenian community in Canada has been long and well established and have demonstrated, as well as just about any other community, how when a country is welcoming and open and allows paths to success, that you can come and build a better future here in Canada than anywhere else. It highlights that diversity can and must be a source of strength instead of a source of division and weakness. And among the many extraordinarily successful diasporas from around the world that have become not just part of Canada, but Canadian, Armenian Canadians are certainly an excellent example.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Prime Minister. My name is Lonnie Ding Everson. I'm with TV Asahi from Japan. The upcoming G7 Foreign Ministers meeting is less than 2 weeks and is going to be held in Hiroshima, Japan. Though the G7 summit itself is going to be held elsewhere in Iseshima, is there a message that you take away from this summit that you'd like to be carried over into Hiroshima's meeting, given the significance of the location there, and also the Japanese government's interest in possibly having a Hiroshima declaration for a nuclear weapon-free world?
Well, Canada is one of the original countries that was part of the Manhattan Project, and as such, we had the choice to become a nuclear weapon state. We chose not to. We made that deliberate choice because because that was the choice we made. And we understand that that is something we definitely need to all work on. There are still an awful lot of nuclear weapons out there, and a number of countries, including the United States under President Obama, have talked about continuing efforts towards nuclear disarmament and more progress that can be made. However, this particular summit was very much focused on securing the civilian nuclear sites, whether it's medical or for energy, to ensure that the easiest vulnerabilities that have been targeted in potential cases by terrorists are more secure. But there are many more issues that I know the global community will be talking about in the coming months and indeed years that were highlighted during this important summit.
Would the Hiroshima Declaration for a nuclear weapon-free world, is that something you would support?
Canada has always hoped for a nuclear weapon-free world, and we know that it's not going to happen tomorrow, but it is something that I think we can all agree we should work on.
Leah from Voice of America's Mandarin Service. Mr. Prime Minister, I'm wondering if you can talk about the prospect of cooperation between China and Canada in the energy field and also in the nuclear security. And also, I would like to take this opportunity to ask you about your view on the nuclear threat posed by North Korea and also the differences between China and the United States on the South China Sea. Thank you.
Okay. First of all, obviously, the question of North Korea came up a number of times during our discussions over the course of the past 2 days. It is extremely alarming that North Korea continues to behave in a way that completely disregards not just international pressures and conventions, but safety for the world and the region. And it is an issue that I know we will continue to talk about both at the G7 in May and then again in China at the G20 in the fall. So this is an issue that is of real concern, which is why Canada co-sponsored the tougher sanctions that have been brought in on North Korea just a few weeks ago, and that remains a concern. Obviously, with China, Canada has a long history. We were the first Western country to officially recognize China 45 years ago. And we continue to look for ways to increase our collaboration on an economic, on a cultural, on a people-to-people level. There are issues that we have differences of opinion with China on, including human rights and other issues. But I know that there's always an opportunity to engage constructively and positively with countries like China to ensure that the best interests of both our peoples are served with a better relationship.
Tatiana Vorozhko, also Voice of America, Ukrainian service. Canada was a great supporter of Ukraine for this difficult time. However, I believe it was Minister of Foreign Affairs of Canada who mentioned that policy of isolation of Russia doesn't work. Can we expect any changes in terms of sanctions against Russia and support to Ukraine from your government? Thank you.
Let me be very, very clear. You said Canada was a great supporter of Ukraine. Canada is a great supporter of Ukraine. We stand very firmly and strongly against the illegitimate and illegal territorial expansion by Russia into Ukraine, and we stand with our Ukrainian friends. We have indicated that we will begin to engage with Russia on a number of issues, from the Arctic to other issues. But part of that engagement is to state clearly at every opportunity that we are unflinching in our support of Ukraine and will remain so. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Bonne journée.